Hey everybody, I'm Danny Grossman, and thanks for joining us for ILTV's weekly program, One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. We want to give you, our viewers, the chance to have your questions answered by Professor Dershowitz, one of America's greatest legal minds. He's a leading expert on criminal and constitutional law, civil liberties, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. Hi, Professor. Thanks for joining us again.
Hi, thank you so much.
Well, Professor Dershowitz, we are honored and delighted to have as your special guest one of the greatest heroes of our lifetime, Natan Sharansky. Natan was a leader of the human rights movement in the former Soviet Union. Together with people like Andrei Sakharov, Natan was also a leader in the struggle, of course, for the Soviet Jewry and a prisoner of conscience who served 9 out of a 13-year sentence on trumped-up charges before being released and coming to Israel. In 1996, he established the Israel B'Aliyah Party to help new immigrants and served in 4 successive Israeli governments as a member of Knesset, a minister, and deputy prime minister. Mr. Sharansky just stepped down after 9 years as chairman of the Jewish Agency for Israel. This year, Natan was awarded the prestigious Israel Prize and is the only living non-American to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Natan, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful. Thank you. You're, as you know, one of my great heroes. As I've said, one of the great moments of my life was when I first physically met you after working on your case for so many years, and you threw your arms around me and you whispered in my ear, Baruch Matir Asurim.
Wow.
And never forget that. It was one of the great, great moments of my life. I also describe it as the largest legal fee I ever got, even though I represented you pro bono. Just to hear those words from your mouth, looking at you and seeing you healthily having survived the gulag, something that your imprisoners did not want you to do. It was one of the great moments of Jewish history.
Thank you, Alan. I felt very relaxed in prison because I knew I can rely on you guys.
So let's get started. Natan, would you tell us about your personal struggle, what inspired you and sustained you through these hard years? And Alan, then we'd like to hear a little bit more about your battle on behalf of a man you were only to meet years later. Natan?
Well, I was absolutely assimilated Soviet Jew. I had nothing Jewish in my life. No holidays, no history, no language, no faith. I had one very Jewish thing, a lot of anti-Semitism. And then, thanks to Israel, thanks to its victory in 1967, we discovered that there is a country that we can be proud of, that thinks about us, fights for us, and then it gives you strength to start fighting for your rights, for the rights of other Jews, and then for the rights of everybody. And then, in this process of struggle, you discover there is Jewish people from all over the world who want to help you. And it's altogether this discovery of your country, of your people, of your history that you want to be part of it. It gives you a lot of strength. So when I was arrested and sentenced to prison for being spokesman of our movement, I was absolutely confident that whatever KGB tells me, Jews don't stop fighting for one day for my release. And that's what was giving me strength and confidence. And that the fact that the leading young lawyers like Alan Dershowitz or Irvin Kotler, or the leading rabbis and the leading politicians are part of the struggle. That's what was giving me strength and confidence.
Well, let me tell you the bad news that you know, but I know you don't like to talk about it. When Erwin and I went to Israel to gather information to help represent you, there were people in Israel, including people high up in the movement to protect Soviet Jewry, who said, do not go near Natan Sharansky. He is not a prisoner of Zion. He is a human rights activist. He's a Sakharov guy. He's not one of our people. And if you persist on trying to help Natan Sharansky on behalf of Israel, we will cut you off from all resources. And of course, Erwin and I looked these people in the eye and told them what we thought. We said, we love Natan. He's our client. He stands for human rights and for Israel together. That's the combination we most admire. And we ignored the naysayers in Israel and continued to fight for you. As soon as you were released and came to Israel, these very same people embraced you, threw their arms around you, and said, we always were supporting Natan Sharansky. He was our guy. That's just not the reality.
Yeah. Well, Alan, unfortunately, I know it very well because from the very beginning, when I became activist of Zionist movement and activist of human rights movement, there were voices on both sides. And from Israel, of course, there were voices that the real Zionists should not deal with dissidents. Sachar was a great man, but you should not confuse our struggle and his struggle. We don't want to interfere in his struggle. We don't want him to undermine our struggle. And there was voices on the other side from human rights activists that if you really believe in human rights, you cannot be a Zionist. And I always thought it's nonsense. I felt that there is some very deep connection. I became a free person only because I had found my identity. My Zionism made me free. And also that people who are fighting for the freedom, they're also my best allies, because after all, we all want to live in Jewish democratic society. So yes, and Alan, unfortunately, I know it very well, but I always tried to look over their heads, as my wife did, by the way, because many Israeli authorities told her, forget about your husband betrayed Zionism, he's now a human rights activist.
Well, we're going to go with that in a minute, but so our first question, as you know, Natan, we have people who send in video questions. So the first question comes from someone you know, asking about the forgotten lessons of the Cold War and the struggle for Soviet Jewry. So let's hear what your daughter, Rachel, asked you at AIPAC last year.
You had a very clear enemy to unite against, the Soviet Union, and you had a very clear cause to unite around, getting the Jews out of there. Whereas for us, we have many enemies and many causes, and our causes sometimes clash. How can we be expected to be united like you? So, you know, I want to put this question to you. In what ways do you think that your struggle is a relevant model for my generation today?
Natan?
Oh my God, that was quite a question.
Well, your daughter's a smart person.
And I was very impressed because the biggest audience that she spoke before was 100 people. And here she's speaking to 15,000 people. And as if we are speaking at home. I was nervous, she not. Look, the relevance is today that, in fact, we have to say that everything was important. It was very important that we were uncompromising Zionists. And it was very important that there were people who came to the struggle because of their human rights, because of their fighting together with Martin Luther King, and now they felt they continue the struggle. And this feeling of continuation of the global fight for justice, uniting with the Zionists who want finally, after 1,000 years, our own national state, it was so deep and connection was so passionate. And it was stronger than all our disagreements. We had a lot of disagreements. It seems today that it was all one moment. There were so many Jewish organizations who were quarreling. I had to take risk and to put people under the risk twice, tourists, to deliver our message to two different organizations on the same street in New York, because these organizations will not talk to one another. But with all these, all of them were part of this great world movement for justice and for Jewish rights. And that's the lesson. Today, when students at the university say, but we want to help to the world, we don't want them to be working for our shtetl. You say, if you really want to change the world, start from your family, from your people, from your national rights, and that will be the best what you can do to the world. And that is the best way to fight also for human rights.
Well, Alan, let's turn to you then. Is there a difference between human rights and fighting anti-Semitism or fighting for Jewish rights? Alan, you always said when it comes to civil liberties and human rights, the Jews are the canary in the coal mine.
I think one of the greatest struggles for human rights in the 21st century is recognizing the legitimacy of Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people, the legitimacy of Israel's right to defend itself against threats, external and internal terrorism, and Iran. These are great, great and profound human rights. There's no country in the world that tries harder to strike a balance between defending its own citizens, which is a core human right, and making sure that it reduces the number of enemy civilian casualties. I challenge students all over the world to name a country. I did it when I debated at Oxford. I did it when I was at Harvard. I did it at Berkeley. Name a country in the world faced with threats comparable to those faced by Israel. that has ever had a better record of human rights, more concern for the rights of civilian enemies, and more adherence to the rule of law. And the idea that Israel is subjected to the double standard that Natan has so eloquently and courageously pointed out is one of the great issues of human rights today. So I am so proud of the fact that I haven't compromised my commitment to human rights in 50 years, nor have I compromised my commitment to Zionism and to support for the nation state of the Jewish people. That doesn't mean I don't have criticisms of Israel or criticisms of the United States. Of course I do. I have criticisms of every country. Look at England. I love England, but it's now moving into the sewer of anti-Semitism as one of its great parties. The Labour Party, which I supported for so many years, is now headed by a blatant man who tolerates anti-Semitism and espouses anti-Zionism. We have real problems of human rights in the world, but we're on the right side of that issue. And our job is to persuade the world, particularly young people, that to be a Zionist is to be a supporter of fundamental human rights.
So let's shift our focus right now to Jewish peoplehood. Natan, you wrote a brilliant essay, Can American and Israeli Jews Stay Together as One People? Can you share your main points with us?
Well, it's a big essay. I'll say the main thing. In the dialogue, or in the broken dialogue between Israel and diaspora Jewry, there is issue of security, which unfortunately majority of our good friends in diaspora don't understand in what environment we live, and are trying to judge with their conditions of life our decisions. On the other hand, there is issue of Jewish pluralism, and the Israelis, who are very far from these problems, try to judge diaspora Jewry with our norms, saying, well, if we don't need reform the conservative. We are, as Ben-Gurion said, synagogue to which I don't go is Orthodox. Why should we confuse ourselves with all these problems? And these two misunderstandings, disconnections, are now threatening with big divide among liberal American Jews, and the majority of American Jews consider themselves liberal, and Israelis who are true to the policy of this government, what is majority of Israelis. And the only way to avoid it is to have a serious, permanent, day-to-day dialogue where even if you don't agree, but you understand the reasons why the other side has to behave like this. Today, it is very important, if we want to guarantee our survival together and not separately, it's very important that we'll talk to one another all the time, that there are institutions which permit us to talk and try to understand one another.
Alan?
I have a slightly different take on that. I agree with everything Natan said, but I want to be much, much tougher on American Jews. I think for a lot of American Jews, the question is a very simple one. How can Israel make my life more pleasant? So in 1967, Israel made the life of American Jews more pleasant. We thumped our chest. We said, we're so proud of Israel. We're proud to be Jews. Wow, look how strong the Israeli army is. Look what they did in 6 days. We are so, so proud of Israel. Then came the Soviet Jewry movement. And we were able to say, look how proud the Soviet Jewry movement in Israel is making us to be Jews. Our friends, our colleagues all say, oh, you're Jewish, Israel. Wow, we love to be with you because we love Israel, we love you. When it became more difficult to defend Israel, when Israel's relationship to the Arab and Muslim world became more complex, when human rights groups turned against Israel, Israel became an embarrassment to American Jews. And so many American Jews said, and you quote it in your essay, oh, it would be much easier for us if Israel didn't exist. And so what you have is people like Peter Beinart, who claim, oh, it's good to be a Jew. I'm proud to be a Jew. I want to associate. But Judaism and Zionism have become somewhat incompatible. And I'm embarrassed to be a Zionist. Many other young people like him aren't treated well at dinner parties anymore. They're told, oh my God, you support Israel. you're a Zionist, that's not something that we find compatible. And so the end result is the pro-Israel community gets divided into several groups. Many just stop having anything to do with Israel on college campuses. Okay. We're not anti-Israel, we're not pro-Israel, it's just not our issue. Others turn virulently anti-Israel. They join Students for Justice for Palestine. Others become even more staunchly right-wing Zionists, and we're seeing that on college campuses today. So I think the struggle for maintaining liberal support for Judaism and Israel together on college campuses is becoming much more difficult. I think of myself as one of the last remaining very liberal Zionist supporters of Israel, and it's become much more difficult to make that case today on college campuses.
Well, Alan, that's perfect, because this leads us exactly to our next question from Shiran Chalfon. Shiran works for the Jewish Agency, Natan, in Jerusalem as the educational director of the Israel Fellows Program, where she trains and mentors emissaries, what we call shlichim in Hebrew, to work on campuses around the world, particularly in the United States. So let's hear from her.
Hi, I'm Shiran, here at the Jewish Agency campus, where we train our future emissaries that go out to campuses around the world. One of our greatest challenges is what we call the new face of anti-Semitism. A lot of people say we have nothing against the Jews, we're only against Zionism and Israel racist policies. What would you say to that? And is there a diagnostic tool for detecting anti-Semitism?
Natan?
Well, many years ago, when first time I had to deal with this as a minister in Israel government, when each time when some awful anti-Semitic statements are made by some politicians, and we say it's a new anti-Semitism, they say no, it is legitimate criticism of Israel. I proposed 3D principle. Anti-Semites use demonization, double standard, and the legitimization of Jews. Let's see if you, in your statements, are using double standard towards Israel, you are demonizing Israel, you're delegitimizing Israel. If yes, that is anti-Semitism. And I have to say, unfortunately, it works, and we have more and more these 3D new anti-Semitism in the world. And it's good that some countries accept my definition, and some, like at this moment, Labour Party, refuse to accept it.
The problem with any singular definition, and I think yours is the best out there, is I don't want to make it a crime to express anti-Semitism. I strongly believe in freedom of speech, even the freedom of speech to express anti-Semitic views. So I'm happy to use the 3Ds as a guidance for personal decisions, for moral condemnation, for criticism, but I'm not comfortable having a formal legal definition that carries with it legal consequences. Okay. So, one thing about you and me, Natan, in the end, whenever we sit down and have a conversation, we sometimes start with a little bit of disagreement. At the end, we almost always agree about everything, because I think I've always said about you, Natan, your family and my family came from the same part of Europe. If my family had made the right turn and had gone to the Soviet Union, and your family had come to America early on, you'd be the lawyer and you'd be the great, the advocate for Zionism in America. And I hope I would have had the courage to be Natan Sharansky. I doubt I would have had the courage, but I see so many similarities in our backgrounds, even though we were brought up in completely different contexts. I was brought up very Orthodox, and I became much more secular. You were brought up very secular and became much more committed to Jewish religious values. But, we, the two of us together with Erwin and others, represent the diversity of Jewish values, and we have to figure out ways of uniting us. I like to talk about making the 80% case for Israel, not defending every action that Israel takes any more than I defend every action the United States takes, but to show how much every supporter of Israel should join together defending Israel against Iran, defending Israel against terrorism, making sure Israel remains a pluralistic Jewish democracy. All of those things are things we share in common.
Well, here, this is something very controversial, so I'm going to give you both 10 seconds to answer it. Okay, I want to get your take on the newly passed bills like the nation state law and the anti-BDS legislation restricting entry to the country, people like Lara Al-Qassam, who's been detained at Ben Gurion Airport for allegedly supporting BDS. What do you think about these bills?
Well, these are two different bills. BDS bill, from the very beginning, I said it's a stupid bill. I said, ask people who are fighting BDS in the campuses. Ask our shlichim. They'll tell them, we don't need this bill. Who needs the law which doesn't permit to those who support BDS to enter Israel? And today we have the best example. When you start using this bill, like with this girl, you are now turning this girl who was now nobody. Well, one of those girls who was saying stupid things about BDS. We are turning her into a very popular figure, fighter against Israel. So that's one thing. As to national law, we need national law. We need clear declaration that Israel is about a gathering of exiles. Israel is about connecting every Jew to the state of Israel. Israel takes responsibility for continuity of Jewish people. But at the same time, it must be clearly said that all the citizens have equal rights. The fact that our legislators, now building our constitution, didn't find it possible to write a very basic and simple thing, that all the citizens of Israel are equal in front of the law. That is a big failure. And as I said on the conference recently about the law, I said, if you ask me in one word, it's good. If you ask me in two words, it's not good. Good because we need this law, not good because we need, together with the law, very clear definition about equality of all the citizens.
And Alan, when we're at the end, can you just give us a quick take?
I agree completely on the BDS law. People want to advocate BDS. That's their right to do it. We should defeat them in the marketplace of ideas, not bring them into court or keep them out of Israel. As far as the nation-state law, I don't think it was necessary. I think it would have been better just to enact as a basic law the Israeli Declaration of Independence, which both declares Israel to be the nation-state of the Jewish people and declares equality for all of its citizens.
So before closing, is there anything you guys don't agree on? I mean, the show is called One-on-One. Yeah. So, Natan, I'll let you start first. Pick a sport, and you can have it out with Alan at that sport. And then, Alan, you can make a counter-proposal on your sport.
Chess, please. Chess. Let's play chess.
I used to be a chess player. In fact, I don't know if you remember this, Natan, but when the Maccabiah, about 10 years ago, they wanted to open a Maccabiah by having you and me play chess against each other. And I said I would be so humiliated and mortified. I would do it only if Natan promised not to beat me in 4 moves. If he gave me 7 or 8, I would play the game, but not in 4.
And what sport, Alan, would you choose? What sport would you choose?
Oh, for me, one-on-one basketball. I got him on the
everybody wants his level of seeing things. But that's how we will see things eye to eye.
Well, okay, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks, Professor Dershowitz. And, of course, I'd like to thank our guest, Natan Sharansky. If you'd like Professor Dershowitz to answer your questions, go to iltv.tv or our Facebook page and submit them. And we'll see you again next week.